Hello, partners, customers, and all fans of technology trends. It's your old pal and host of the Akamai Partner Champions podcast, Nick Watkins. Now, if you've been following Akamai, and I assume you have because you're watching my ugly mug right now, well, then you know 2025 was an impactful year for Akamai, particularly in the AI space. After all, you can't spell Akamai without AI. Now, as we turn the page to 2026, many of you may be wondering how you can harness the transformative power and potential of AI. So I brought in the big guns to add insights and considerations around how you can elevate your business with AI. Now, it is my pleasure at this time to introduce our guest for today's episode. Some call him the Colossus of Cloud, others the AI Alchemist of Akamai, but here we simply call him our Vice President of Product Marketing. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Weil.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now we're going to dive right in because AI is a hot topic right now. I mean, look, organizations are feeling the pressure to adopt AI and recognize the significant benefits it can have to their business. So to set the stage for our discussion today, can you start by sharing your perspective on how AI is currently impacting enterprises, particularly in terms of user engagement and security?
100%. So I think first and foremost, we have to recognize that everybody across the globe, across every industry, is talking about AI, is trying to learn AI, is playing with AI at home and at work. And it's really consuming just about, every moment of the day for everybody. And in some cases, it's consuming the evenings. In fact, that's one of the key insights that Akamai is seeing is that over the course of just the last 6 months, we've seen bot traffic and AI bot traffic specifically grow 300%. And a lot of that bot traffic is always on crawling things, learning and feeding these large language models that make, things like ChatGPT and Claude and how we use, other AI assistants possible. And that's really exciting. But from an enterprise perspective, the big thing is like, well, how do I invest in this to turn it into ROI for my business? And how do I avoid it opening up, new risks for me that I haven't thought about? Because one of the greatest things about being able to stick a ChatGPT interface on an existing application is you think as a business leader, I'm going to improve customer experience. I'm going to improve customer outcomes. I can take a lot of the challenges of people having bad days or making mistakes or forgetting to put a tag on a specific piece of data that ultimately impacts me downstream. And I can automate all of those things. And that should be true. And in some small cases, we are seeing early use cases of what people are calling agents today, which is kind of just small automated programs, a lot of whom have either a chat interface or are using a large language model for some of their intelligence, but they're doing things for people. And that's really awesome. But here's the thing. They are not deterministic. You have to put guardrails on. People have to learn how to keep people involved in anything that we do for compliance and certifications and to test privacy to regulators and to our customers. So there's a huge amount to learn, but that customer experience improvement, that improvement of ROI, that streamlining of processes, it's such an attractive proposition that what we're seeing going from 2025 to 2026 is a lot of enterprises learning from those initial experiments and now really starting to double down and challenge their vendors and partners on how you have AI that works and can work for them.
I love that response. I mean, we're going to get a little bit more into agentic AI and some of the different use cases a little bit further on, but I had one topic at the top that I really just wanted to talk through, and I've really been thinking about the digital landscape shifting, right? I mean, it used to be search and click to ask and receive, right? The traditional link-based economy is facing this huge transition. Basically, LLMs are increasingly acting as like this primary interface for user intent. So businesses are no longer just fighting for a spot on page one. I mean, they're fighting to be the authoritative data source that AI chooses to cite, or even the platform that the AI experiences on itself. So my question for you, I was curious, with LLM searches changing user engagement, monetization across industries, can you elaborate a little bit on how Akamai solutions are helping businesses adapt to these changes?
Yeah, so actually there's three ways or three buckets, I guess, that I think about this in. There's the first thing that we think about, which is how do we help people adapt to what AI is doing to them, could be doing for them. Then you start thinking about, okay, if I have a business plan and a business strategy, then how do I think about securing AI and protecting myself against AI when I have a better idea of how I'm changing my strategy, how my app is going to evolve, maybe some new use cases or new user paths that I'm going to be creating in my application. And then the last thing is, how would I plan to grow from there? So if we think about that as sort of a maturity curve, so to speak, that you could follow for AI, then the first thing we think about is, okay, I have to adapt to AI. What do I have to adapt to? Well, we said, first of all, bot traffic is growing. And do I understand right now who is coming to my site and what their intent is? Because before AI becomes more prolific, the first thing is like, do I know what I'm dealing with? Do I have a baseline? Can I establish some basic rules of the road? Can I tell my marketing team what they should be expecting for volumes of traffic that are human versus agent? And have I thought about with my marketing team? Of course, we've thought about it, but how do I optimize my website so that a human visitor gets what they need and I continue to work on SEO and paid search strategy and everything that drives my demand? But in so doing, I also think about those zero-click searches like the Google's Gemini search that can impact traffic to some sites by up to 92% because you get your answer right away. You don't have to follow those blue links. So how do I
Right.
create a programmatic version of my site to make sure that I'm found in GEO searches? So Akamai's products in that area, first of all, we have our app and API protection platform. So we've got a leading WAF. It's got API security that we can include or we can sell as a separate product to customers. We've also got our bot and abuse portfolio, and that's been especially helpful for publishers to protect their content and help them with monetizing access to content, something that's been a concern with LLM crawlers, and again, reputationally and for your ad revenue for those zero-click searches. We think about Bot Manager as well with helping you identify
Yeah.
not just the bots that come to you for scraping, which could be good or it could be bad, but we also help you with which ones are now the AI bots and what type of AI bots are they? And how can you manage them so that you can gather some intelligence and work with the bot operators to monetize for your business and to maintain your reputation and your revenue stream? But then you can also consider how will I manage those that I don't want to provide access to without just blocking them at the CDN level and losing all of that visibility and all of that strategic advantage. So our partners know those products really well. As we expand into AI applications, we have a firewall for AI that helps you with those chat interfaces that you might be enabling so that you don't have somebody abusing the prompts, basically telling your application to do things that it shouldn't do, but you haven't thought about yet applying guardrails for because it's such early days and we're still experimenting with AI. And if I think about kind of where we go from there, I've got now my application protected, my APIs discovered and protected. I'm thinking about the prompts for my application as well. I can identify who's coming to my site and start to manage them correctly. The next thing that I start thinking about is how are they going to access my data? And so that's where we think about segmentation, where Akamai, between API security and segmentation, provides you with the ability to discover your APIs, to discover your workloads, devices, users on the platform, and then your network security team and your application security team, as we move into the protection layer, can really start thinking now, how do I apply those protections? We're great at providing WAF protections, and our partners are experts at that. We have managed WAF services with some of you. We have the ability to also generate automatic policy on Akamai and give you confidence scores. We've applied the same thing to bots. We've extended that to API security, and we also do the same thing in Guardicore. And so as we go from adapting to protecting, we have the same sets of services that can provide that continuity and value to our customers through our partners that they can take advantage of. And we're providing updates on all of that AI messaging and use cases to help you kind of generate those opportunities and conversations.
So well said. The one cheap plug I will do for our partners listening is check out the Akamai Partner Portal, which has just been recently revitalized with a lot of the great content, thought leadership that Ari referenced here. We've actually incorporated a lot into our revised Partner Portal, so cheap plug to check that out. But absolutely, like I think you touched on something really important, which is kind of thinking about the security part of it as well. I mean, look, the technical infrastructure of a media site has evolved. It's not simply a delivery mechanism. It's now a strategic defense layer, right? Like you're managing a delicate balance between blocking unauthorized scrapers and fueling the LLMs that drive your brand visibility. But that does bring us to a critical area of concern for the industry. I mean, how are publishers adapting their strategies in response to AI-driven changes, and what role does Akamai play in this adaptation?
So if we think about publishers, publishers can be really considered like the tip of the spear for several other industries, because if anybody monetizes through their website, if they have an affiliate strategy, an advertising strategy where impressions matter, then you think about our commerce customers, our travel customers, you think about manufacturing companies. These are all companies that have an inventory of content that they have to have found. A lot of them are going to have login specific experiences that they enable, content that they only make available to people who have authenticated or have a subscription or pay for a given experience or piece of content. And so while they're not exactly the same, publishing is unique for certain, but publishers were the first ones to start calling foul on all of the LLMs that were basically ignoring robots.txt that say, don't crawl me, that are suggesting that you should represent who you are, and what your intent is. But there are no standards for those types of things yet because we're in such a fast developing space. And so the way that the publishers have been trying to work here is first and foremost, understanding who is coming to them. So can edge cloud providers like Akamai provide them with the visibility to tell them who is coming to their sites, what their intent is, and then provide them with a technical ability to basically ask nicely, but programmatically for
Right.
payment to access to something that's protected, because that's taking care of your best interest and growing your
Yeah.
business. If we think about from there, okay, now if they don't comply, how can we manage them in a strategic fashion, in a business aligned fashion, also obviously complying with regulations for privacy and also fair use on the internet. And that's where we
Of
help them
course.
with our bot and abuse suite, where you can correctly manage the flow of content, the pace of content, what sort of a response you might send generally. If you decide that you actually want to block somebody, you can do it with full visibility and full sort of awareness of what you're doing and why. So we want to help the publishers with all of that. And that's where we partnered as well with two partners, Tolbit and Skyfire, so that when it's time to ask for monetization, as we're developing the standards for how that actual interface works, right now we can put those partners in line and start to work programmatically with our LLM partners, with the publisher's LLM partners, so that they are part of the conversation and part of the agreement for how basically content crawling, content scraping, or just content access is fairly monetized. So it's basically an extension of the bot and abuse suite. It's two partners that we have and that we can always facilitate introductions to. We've got content to help you drive those conversations. So I think that that's a really important thing. Now, the second part of this, which is another partner that we've been working with, there's a company called Scrunch AI that has partnered with us as an ISV partner in an Akamai cloud context, but we've started to work
Mhm.
with as well across security. Because when we think about that programmatic copy of your website, that GEO optimization, so if I ask ChatGPT a question, or if I go into any other sort of LLM search, you have a couple of concerns. One, do you show up? Two, is your content going to be represented the way that you intend it to be represented, which is a bit of the security and sort of bot and content
Oh yeah.
management conversation. But then the third, is it going to represent the best and most recent thing that you want to have show up? So if it's inventory, it might be the price, or it might be availability, or it could be the latest style. If it's content, it could be if you
Right.
update a given blog or an editorial piece. You want to make sure that the best is always out there and the best is always accessible, so that the crawlers crawl the right things and surface the right things to give you the best opportunity in that zero click search reality of having your content show up the way that you want it. It's not just for that, of course. It's also for other sorts of programmatic and agentic searches. But that's really the tip of the spear that most marketers and frankly most revenue focused leaders are thinking about today. Is I have my access, my user traffic eroded, and I need to fix that. So where
Right.
Scrunch helps is it looks at your content. They'll work with you as a team to prioritize what needs to be displayed, and then they will prioritize making sure that when the LLM scrapers come to your site, they've got that programmatic version that they can access to feed the right information that's optimized for the scrapers. And the best thing about doing this with Akamai and working with you all as partners is we can offer anything from the components and the access to the partners so that you can do this yourself and you can add the managed service on top of this. Or we have services packages that we can partner with you on so that where you don't have the
Yeah.
existing experience, we can layer that on ourselves. But we want to make the full spectrum of how basically as a publisher or moving forward, commerce, manufacturing, and travel companies think about preserving their traffic, their user flow, and ultimately their revenue streams by thinking about not just securing their sites, but also adapting to the reality of AI scrapers And it happens to be a really nice, easy conversation from an Akamai security conversation.
I love that too. I mean, it's a very eloquent summation of kind of the real world challenges that we're tackling. And I mean, these things are evolving in real time, so it's just been crazy. The one thing that you said that I kind of perked my ears up a little bit too was on the partner side of things. And so, as a channel first organization, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about partners. But I mean, how can partners help businesses adapt their user engagement monetization strategies to this changing landscape that's driven by LLM searches and AI?
Well, I think the obviously the answer is going to depend on where your area of expertise is. I mean, there's a few areas here where if we think about that sort of adapt, protect, and extend maturity curve, right now questions abound with how do I need to adapt my security policy, risk policy? How do I need to think about privacy and compliance differently? What is my next audit going to be like? Am I going to change the way that I attest going forward? Can I comply quickly and programmatically to a right to be forgotten request or a subject rights request? These are all things that our customers are dealing with that will touch on IT and security concerns day in and day out. They all support the business because if you don't get your PCI certification or you can't attest your ISO compliance when you need it, obviously that's going to be disruptive from your ability to monetize. And so these are areas where a lot of our partners are likely consulting right now, helping businesses think about their 2026 evolution, whether it's their infrastructure architecture, their partnership strategy, or where they get value added services on top of their vendors that they've selected. And so, from my perspective, Akamai is moving in a few directions to make things easier for partners. First of all, we've been really focusing on our app and API suite to make it easier to install, easier to configure for users in the beginning so that you can move from getting the product, pitched and sold to a customer to very quickly getting to a working implementation that's showing value, and then add the value added service of recommending rules, of doing the readouts so that people understand what's going on with their application security. It could be anything from, how is your attack surface growing with the number of apps and APIs you're deploying, which we can help you with because we automatically discover those and give you reports. But giving those reports in a value added fashion to a customer is a huge help to them. Recommending where they should be using things like the native connector to find APIs and secure them in their cloud environment as they think about a multi-cloud strategy. There are very few things that a customer can do with an existing cloud provider's WAF or API security, API gateway solution that will help them in a multi-cloud context. But you can provide, using Akamai API security, for example, a way for them to discover their APIs and their exposure across multiple clouds that would be strategically aligned to compliance, to certification, and to thinking about your risk management strategy. So I would start maybe there with how is your business changing? What are some of the upcoming events that you are going to have where you're going to have to gather this information, make sure that you can show that you've got the appropriate controls and visibility and logging in place. We've got a great solution called Traffic Peak that a lot of our customers have been taking advantage of because you can stream multiple CDN logs, SIM logs, anything basically that is a comma delimited date stamped file together. And then using a very simple Grafana interface, which a lot of our partners can create custom dashboards and alerting on top of, help people with a multi-cloud strategy of visualizing their traffic, any events that they might have for scale or bot traffic that would disrupt their business. It's another value-added service that you can provide, but Akamai makes it really easy to give you the contracting, and then if you need the services or support, you get all of that from us as you're building the solution for your customer. And then as I think about sort of protection and then into growth, the question becomes, how are you thinking about now with Gartner reporting that by 2027, 50% of enterprise AI workloads are going to be deployed somewhere other than a centralized cloud? So if you think about what that means, this year, enterprises are either architecting or actively deploying off of AWS, Azure, and GCP onto other clouds, sovereign clouds, neo clouds, alternative clouds, in Akamai's case, Akamai Cloud and Akamai Cloud for inference. So as we think about where additional workloads are being deployed, because real time is important, because cost benefits and privacy are important, then you are, as partners, helping people think about where does my compute need to be? Where is my security expanding to? How many new APIs am I going to be creating for agents? Akamai is also developing an MCP strategy that we'll be sharing with you this year ourselves having a hosted MCP server so that you can also build on top of Akamai's MCP server ways that you can use our existing products for an AI-based use case, an agentic use case perhaps. And then as we think about the growth of the AI strategy for Akamai and for you with your customers, everything does stem from basic truths of application security, workload security, access security, and infrastructure security. And we have those four pillars established for you to align to. But we also partner a lot more effectively now, and we've been actively engaging with people like Sneak, like Apiro, thinking about identity providers, for example. We've also been working with Ping Identity and Okta. We've got existing integrations with Microsoft ID as well. So if you just think about like your identity providers connecting with Akamai, your SIM providers, your managed detection and response providers, the ways that you're architecting across this distributed cloud can have one consistent pane of glass, one place where you can see and manage across multiple clouds for application security and for network security. And as we move forward on that AI journey, those two pieces are going to be critical because that's what's going to help your customers manage the flow of information and access from the outside, from the web, from users, from agents, all the way through to their LLMs, to their data workloads, their data pipelines, and ultimately, their crown jewels in the IP that they all need to protect. So it's a good opportunity to start these conversations, this year as we think about momentum building.
The one thing I want to highlight out of that response that I really loved was the way that these products enable consultative selling for our partners. I mean, I've talked to dozens of partners now on this podcast, and the ones that I hear that are the most successful really lead with that consultative approach, that ability to add the context, to help the customer make that decision. Those are the ones that we're seeing really drive a lot of business. And so I just want to highlight and appreciate that sentiment, because I think as we build more products and put more things out in the market, like giving partners that ability to sort of add on their own flavor, their own expertise, like those are the things that fire me up working for Akamai. So I wanted to call that out because I think that's really really exciting as we move into 2026.
Great.
One thing you kind of touched on earlier in our conversation was about GEO, or Generative Engine Optimization. Now, we've talked about how it's altered the digital landscape, right? I mean, it's basically moving beyond just keyword rankings to, becoming an authoritative source on answer engines. So I'm curious, what specific Akamai solutions can partners offer to help customers adjust their infrastructure priorities in response to SEO and GEO changes?
Absolutely. So I think I would take it in a couple of tiers. The first one, if I think about it, when something comes to your website, you want to know what's coming, you want to know what it's trying to get, and then you need to understand basically what is the result of it. And I know that's super vague. So let's think about what I mean. If I'm trying to optimize access to my site for a user, my site has to be dynamic, it should be personalized, it should be fast, and I want to make sure basically that I am driving to some sort of a conversion event for that user. If I have a Google search bot coming to me, they're not going to convert. That's not the point. I can't really personalize, but I have to show that my content is dynamic and it needs to be fast because that factors into my ranking. Now, I also need to make sure that it's free of errors in both of those use cases, but I have to do it for different reasons. So now get to the point, Ari. If I think about AI search bots now coming to my site, so I'm getting crawled by ByteSpider. So, somebody might search through TikTok's search algorithm to try to find me. So ByteSpider is out there and it's going and scraping a whole bunch of websites and it's trying to gather content. The thing is, ByteSpider is not a user and it's not Google search bot. It's looking for different information. It needs it to be structured differently, or else you run the risk that it might either not get the right information, enough information, or otherwise not surface you correctly if somebody asks a question. That's the challenge with GEO. It's not that I have the errors that will stop a conversion event. It's not that I won't be surfaced in a Google search. It's that when everybody is pivoting their usage from I want to go find something to I just need it to tell me what I should do next, you want it to tell it to do you next. So that's the GEO point. Now, how do we do this? So first of all, your website still has to be fast. So we still focus on the embedded delivery that we have inside of our application security products. So if you think about it, you've got a WAF to protect your site. That also helps you understand who's coming to your site. And part of delivering that on Akamai is you get CDN And if you want to sell that, or if your customer bought it, you have accelerated CDN services. On top of that, making sure that your customer has configured core web vitals and eliminated errors from their website so that their pages are showing up, they're not throwing errors, and they're always loading fast is something that you can not only do on Akamai, but then you can optimize for different types of visitors so that you can make sure that all of the programmatic visitors and the human visitors are getting what they need. The second thing that you move to is then I want to get the bot management with Bot Manager Premier with things like account protector if you have logins that you need to protect, and content protector if you have licensed content or otherwise content that you really want to be monitoring and protecting differently. Those capabilities, which we're streamlining this year into a single SKU on the way to having a unified application protection platform, so it'll get much easier to buy and use. That is the next thing you think about for all the visibility, the routing, the management. And then we think about our partner, Scrunch AI, that can then, when you have your strategy, you have your visibility, you know what you want to have go fast and be found by the search engines, both the LLM search engines and any other search engine. You can
Right.
then work with the Scrunch team to say, help me optimize my site for that audience. And the greatest thing about working with them is you don't have to go and create that programmatic version of your site. You have to have your strategy down. They implement for you, and then they help you to monitor and ensure that you are prioritizing monetization opportunities for yourself or traffic optimization opportunities for yourself based on your goals. So they can be a product, but they can be a managed service that works along with you. And that complements what you've done already with Akamai CDN, with Akamai bot management, but it's extending into now a business-centric conversation about how do we provide you value so that your business isn't being impacted. And again, if I think about traffic peak, if you stream all of the logs from Akamai CDN and any other CDN, if you stream all of the logs from Bot Manager and the SIM information that we get, and then you bring in Google Analytics data to that, you can pull it all together and show a picture to your customer of exactly how their traffic is changing and where we are getting different types of bot traffic, as well as whether or not that's impacting any of their monetization opportunities. You can customize all of that really easily in the product, and it brings a nice story together and a great operational dashboard together for your customer.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing that is strikingly apparent to me is that there's not a one size fits all approach to this, right? And so I think that speaks to just a lot of the different options, a lot of different also complexities that kind of speak to why a partner is brought in certain situations like that to kind of help demystify and help kind of understand what are you trying to achieve, and here's the tools and pieces that we can help you get to where you need to go. All right. The next one I'm curious about really deals with Akamai Inference Cloud, and so it's really positioned as a platform to be able to build, run, and secure AI inference applications at a global scale. And so, can you provide a little more insight into how this platform helps businesses extend their capabilities with AI?
Absolutely. So it's an interesting thing if we think about, give me a brief moment to take you on a really, really short journey. But if we think about at websites, in the late 90s, early 2000s were just that. They were basically brochures that we had to distribute across the internet. And over the course of the aughts and the 2010s, these developed into distributed web applications. They became a lot more complicated. And we've all dealt with, sort of the good and the bad from that. But if you think about, some of those really funny things that we see when we see throwbacks, you know, do you remember when websites looked like this? And it's like, you do remember when they looked like that. And they were really
Yeah.
simple to distribute once Akamai created a CDN. But there's a reason that over the years, Akamai had to add things like advanced metadata and JavaScript running at the edge. And then we had things like cloudlets. We started to develop more of our serverless capabilities with, edge workers and edge KV, so you could manage data there. And then we started to actually extend that even further with more advanced functions. And so did the rest of the industry, as we were all realizing that we were developing these really complex applications that we had to distribute. The thing is, throughout that entire journey, for the last 25 years, we really focused on people. Everything has been human centric. We optimize the web for the way that people read. We optimize our websites for the way that your eyes and your brain work. We use tricks and checkouts and landing pages and things like that to control the way that you go through a website. And now, we started to develop AI, and in 2023, ChatGPT sort of lit the world on fire. And a funny thing, I remember sitting once upon a time when they first introduced Alexa, and I was completely gobsmacked by how magical it was. And so I can appreciate, like, there's a difference here, right? Like, we thought that was amazing. That's nothing compared to what just happened with ChatGPT. And so everybody's jumped on this and has gotten super excited about it. But the challenge that we all face with it is like, so what happens next? We talked about the publishers. We talked about how getting that information out of a really quick ChatGPT search is really valuable and people want to do it, but it's coming at the expense of data that shouldn't be crawled, content that shouldn't be crawled. We've seen user traffic drop off as a result. So it was an unintended consequence to a lot of our different customers that as you start to adopt AI, your business is actively changing and not all of it feels that good. And so as we think about like, so what does this mean and what do we do next? Well, the web is becoming agentic. We are realizing that there's a lot of things that frankly people just don't like to do. They're not good at doing. And from a business perspective, if we want to keep up with the way that people are going to be using AI and enterprises are going to start monetizing on AI, then we have to think about interactions a little bit differently. Bots don't go to, like machines don't go to sleep. Somebody asks you a question, they expect an answer. There's a certain level of trust, though, that you establish when you ask that question of Morgan Stanley when you visit them. When I ask a chatbot and it gives me an answer, and I don't know to ask it if it inferred that from a bunch of Instagram videos, Reddit threads, things of that nature that were used for crawling, there's an element here where it's like things are changing, but we're not exactly sure, again, what's good and what's bad in the change. So bringing that all together, what does that actually mean with Akamai Inference Cloud? Akamai is pivoting the way that we have been providing value to our customers. I wouldn't say pivoting as much as maybe evolving it, but thinking about up until now, we've been supporting you in how you deliver and scale and secure all of your mission critical, business critical applications. And we've been doing that with the world's most distributed network, with the ability to distribute compute and security services closer to where your users are. But we haven't really been like present in the conversation about architecting your new application because of everybody in the way that they established a dependence on the hyperscalers. So the center of gravity has been on these centralized clouds. Well, as we said earlier, 50% of enterprise workloads are going to be deployed off of centralized clouds by the end of next year. And so we think about that shift. Akamai is there for that shift now. Our Akamai Cloud provides you with infrastructure as a service capabilities as well as managed services for databases and containers. We've got a number of different flavors of CPU and GPU and even video processing units that we can use for a number of different use cases across industries. But you can consume it just like you would consume a centralized public cloud, except that it's on a high performance network. And then we provide you with the ability to then distribute that compute closer to your users all the way through something that we call a managed container service, where we're actively running workloads for our customers now as managed applications that we deploy on the Akamai Edge. So Inference Cloud is coming at this time where now your distributed application is becoming optimized for and will have to evolve to an agentic sort of a user. So something that's going to come, it wants programmatic information about your website. Your monetization strategy is going to be dependent on some also form of agentic workflow, certainly, whether it's upfront with the customer as middleware or in the back end. But we want to provide the infrastructure for you to be able to build whatever you need to build that needs to extend beyond the centralized hyperscalers. And typically that's going to be what has to be real time, low latency, or require a large throughput of data. Then we want you to think about how do I need to secure that with our edge security services, which is a part of the Akamai platform. And then how are you going to scale that? How do you need to scale your agents? How do you need to scale access to your models? Where do your data pipelines need to go? How do we maintain privacy as we distribute all of that infrastructure and data for you? That is where Akamai is going. And when we announced the Akamai Inference Cloud, that was sort of the first opportunity for us to show how we were partnering with NVIDIA, starting to deploy their latest GPUs, which are the Blackwell series, to our network so that we could provide enterprises with access to GPUs outside of the centralized hyperscalers, but also in areas that are underserved by them. And then to combine that with the rest of our platform so that as you architect what's next, we're there to partner with you just like we did as your website strategy evolved the last time.
Absolutely. There's two things out of that response I wanted to call out to. One was that you just gave me such a wave of nostalgia thinking about early websites. Like I just remember being in like Netscape Navigator and like going to like Pepsi.com when I was like a fat 10-year-old kid in the computer class. But the other one too is like, I speak to a lot of partners, and usually I have to very succinctly sum up why Akamai is, different, better than competition, blah blah. And you said it really eloquently, which is really it boils down to scale, right? I mean, it reduces that latency, it reduces a lot of things, and it doesn't matter if you're talking cloud, cybersecurity, like that scale. I think is really that key differentiator. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think as a lot of people listen and think about some different applications, like I think that is one of the things that really makes Akamai unique. But we're getting to the end of our time here. Looking ahead, I'm curious, how do you see the landscape of AI in enterprises evolving? How is Akamai preparing to meet those customer challenges? And for the partners in the audience, I mean, is there a market or application where you see the most opportunity?
So, absolutely, great question. And I think, a lot of what we talked about is going to start moving faster is probably the summary statement, right? So if we look at the way that AI has been evolving, we have been seeing since 2023 effectively, where you can consider that to some extent to be the big bang for most people to consider AI. That approach of let us experiment, let us try to retrofit, it happened. I think 2025 was the year where most businesses said at this point, most of these experiments were either not well conceived or whatever succeeded, succeeded, whatever failed, failed. But it's time to really consider not just how do I give somebody a chat interface to me, or how do I start thinking about automating some basic processes with agents? I think now it's how am I really going to think about my monetization strategy evolving in the face of interactions with me changing? So the way that you interact with me when I'm thinking about the equation between whatever my monetization strategy might be, is where most business strategists are right now. So if I think about, as an example, if I've always had people coming to me through search, and that was my primary vehicle to drive access to my business, to drive engagement. And now search is becoming something where I ask an LLM for a question and it gives me a suggestion response, but it's not a list of suggestions, plural. It's a suggested do this. And that is impacting me up to 90%. I can't hope it's going to change. And I can't only optimize for my existing access pattern when I realize that access is changing. People are going to continue to use those interfaces. And if we think about agents, instead of people that might keep refining all of their search criteria, because if you think about the way a prompt works right now, right? If you
Right.
search for something, if you search, start with search. If I search for something on Google and I don't get the answers that I expected, I might search for something again, or I might take a recommended search, or I might do, a number of different things. But like, I kind of know what I would do there. If prompting, you're not going to get as frustrated as quickly, but you're also not going to be as deterministic in the way that you search because you're still trying to learn
Right.
how to prompt. And then different model providers are also trying to customize the sort of data that they can provide you, and they're trying to customize their experiences to some extent. So it's going to be very interesting to see how any business that is providing sort of that prompt-based interface is going to start to try to change the way that they deliver an experience based on the intelligence that they get from that prompting. But that's a new skill set, it's a new data path, it's a new
Yep.
user engagement model that we have to understand. And so this is where 2025 going into 2026, from a security perspective, the basics are still applicable. We're extending, the OWASP, for example, we did OWASP top
Yeah.
10, API top 10, now we have an AI top 10, but that is all evolving so quickly that consultative services and helping people understand what they need to do there is critical. Akamai is making sure that we support the latest cryptographic standards on our platform. We're thinking about what happens at quantum advantage. We want to make sure that we are always providing the infrastructure that's required to provide that reliable and compliant infrastructure that our customers need. But those are table stakes that are so quickly evolving, they require a lot of investment, but they're table stakes. So where we see AI going is as people change how their applications look, what their engagement strategies look like, the the infrastructure that they've always relied upon needs to be there to deliver for them. It needs to be increasingly automated. It needs to be increasingly AI driven and connected. And that's what Akamai is doing by bringing together our application security platform, the Guardicore Zero Trust platform, making sure that those are unified and AI powered platforms respectively, so that we're guiding people with recommendations based on data and the signals that we get with our distributed platform. And then as you evolve, we are investing in new capabilities like AI red teaming. We already talked about a firewall for AI. We're thinking about how we need to be providing protection for MCP servers, as that is going to be another interface like APIs that will be part of your threat surface that needs protection. And we're also looking at how we extend private access to all of the different types of endpoints that your business might open up. So for us, it's as you change how you expect people to engage, maybe you start having more of a wearables and an agentic interface that works through, on physical hardware. That might be something where we're having an API conversation and we're thinking about distributed edge, or we're thinking about multi-cloud and how we need to be architecting your compute distribution strategy. That's where Akamai is extending our platform to partner with you as you work with your customers. But if it stays with security, or if it stays just with application security or just with network security, we also have strong roadmaps in both areas. We're committed to supporting AI in both of those areas, and we can just as easily partner with you in those specific areas as opposed to, trying to go into a broader conversation.
Absolutely. Really, really well said. Well, all right, I want to thank you so much for the insightful conversation today. I feel like I learned a ton. I know our partners have learned a ton. I'd be remiss as a marketer if I didn't close with some kind of call to action. Or if for those that want to learn more, beyond maybe the Akamai Partner Portal, are there any resources or recommendations you might make just to, if someone wanted to dig a little bit deeper here?
Well, I would say, first and foremost, keep an eye out for, as we get towards RSA conference this year, the GTC conference, if you're interested in compute. Those are the two areas where Akamai is going to be making significant announcements, and also like concentrating a lot of the work that we do with our partners to make sure that we can collectively show up well together. So I definitely have a look out for that. If you haven't gone to Akamai.com recently and looked at some of the latest information about API security, microsegmentation, or Akamai.com/cloud, I would have a look at some of that refreshed information. We are pushing it out as quickly as we can via the partner portals, but we have also invested this year in growing a developer advocacy team. And one of the things that you'll start seeing a lot more of are these engaging how-to videos, explainers, hands-on labs, GitHub samples, and things like that for MCP on the security side and all things development on the cloud side. So that will be a growing body of work that you can take advantage of. And I think in summary, the way that we think about this is AI needs the edge to scale, and Akamai is already there. And we're really excited to be partnered with all of you as we go on this journey.
Really well said. All right. Thank you again to our partners, customers, and all fans of technology trends. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Akamai Partner Champions podcast. Take care.